Awesome. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 149th Melbourne AWS User Group Meetup. Next month is 150. That went fast. Well, over a period of 13 or so years. But first, in the spirit of reconciliation, the Melbourne AWS User Group acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. Our in-person meetup is being held on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners of this land. We pay our respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Just as important, we have a code of conduct. You will see a short version here. There's a longer version on the website. The very short version is be nice to each other. Obviously, if you see something or if you don't feel comfortable with somebody, reach out to one of the organizers, the three of us here today. Or if you prefer to do it anonymously, there's a form on the site. Let's just make sure it's a pleasant environment for everybody. That's what we all want. No. We are on the web, the website, LinkedIn. I still need to set up a new Mastodon account because the old one that the host went away. And obviously YouTube as well. If you're watching this live, that definitely won't come as a surprise, but that is where you can always find the old recordings of our meetups. Tonight, the introductions, that's the boring bit I'm doing now. After this, Jason over there will tell us about all the things that are new in AWS since last month. This is followed by Lovey giving a talk about API destinations for private endpoints. And our second speaker is Matt, who's sitting at the back in the Lambda shirt, about detecting faults in aged care. We'll end the night with a marketplace segment, which is basically, the idea there is if you're hiring, hold up your hands, you get to do a 30-second spiel, and people can talk to you afterwards. The reason we do it that way is so that you don't end up in the awkward situation of sitting next to your manager and saying, yeah, I'm looking for a new job. Might not always go over well. And then we all go home in a reasonably fast fashion because at 8:30 I have buses replacing my trains. Because this is Melbourne. That always happens. Rob already mentioned it. Feel free to ask questions, but try to wait until the end if you're in person. If you're watching this live online, please feel free to ask your questions at any time, and we'll cover them at the end. You can do so in the Slack channel. If you're not on Slack chat, I'll show you where to go in a moment. Or you can do it, of course, in the YouTube chat itself. Now, none of this is possible without our lovely sponsors. Our gold sponsor for this year is Mental, or Mental Group. And yeah, we'll love them for that, as well as our silver sponsor, Civo. And last but definitely not least, NAB, who provide us with this lovely venue every month. So thank you to all of our sponsors. They provide us all the goodies, except the talks. They come from our lovely speakers. I mentioned Slack before. You can go there to get an invite to the Slack. It's just a whole self-automated stuff that there is for Slack. We've got, honestly, it's over 1,000 people in there. Some days it's busy, some days not so much. It depends a bit. With channels for all the different things that may or may not be interesting to you. and just good chats can be had there. We'd love for everybody to get involved with our meetup. The most important one always is speakers. If you have a talk, let us know. You can fill it out to the form, you can contact one of us, and we'll probably direct you to the form to submit it officially. But we will also happy to help you work on your idea to turn it into a talk. Sponsorships, we do a yearly sponsorship, so halfway through the year, don't tend to get a lot of new sponsors, but think about if you or your company are thinking to sponsor next year, we're always open to have anybody reach out. And of course, volunteers, if you want to volunteer, got some of our lovely volunteers over there. They help organize the evening, make sure things go smoothly, things like that. If you want to help out, we'd love to hear from you. Similarly, we are trying to get more fresh blood in the committee. So if you're interested in that bit as well, definitely talk to us. We love to hear any new ideas about, hey, how can we improve this? So, yeah. Okay. So, upcoming events. There's this thing called reInvent. You may or may not have heard of it. It's basically AWS's big event in Las Vegas every year. It's also very expensive, especially flying there from here adds to that. So you either need somebody to pay for it. It can be your company, AWS. If you are in the early stages of your career, you have the option of applying for the All Builders Welcome Grant that opened just today. This can get you an all expenses paid trip to reInvent. Definitely with applying. Dale Orders, one of our volunteers who happens to be in the US because she got the All Builders Welcome Grant for Reinforce. She's happy to answer any questions and such about it on Slack. Community Day. This is an even bigger event, said as one of the organizers. Community Day Australia is coming to Brisbane on the 15th of August. You can now buy your tickets for it. It's $20. It's not a lot of money, just more to make sure you actually show up. So it's going to be a great day. We've got some great speakers already. You'll hear more about them when they get announced. So yes, if you can, please come. Closer to home, the AWS Programming and Tools Meetup is going to be on the 9th of July. But as mentioned on the Slack yesterday, they're still looking for somebody to actually give the next workshop. Is that still the case? Do you know? Don't know. Cool. Yeah. For here as well, if you're interested in running a workshop, which is really a good experience, it's a lot of fun. I've always enjoyed doing it.
Come talk to me anytime tonight.
Yep. Talk to Michael. That's good. And otherwise, Dale mentioned it in the Slack. You can respond to her as well. Women in Cloud is tomorrow evening. I promised I would put it in here, even though tomorrow is not technically an AWS related one. It's a Kubernetes related one, but well, let's not be too harsh about that. It's still a good event. So the AWS Well Architected Meetup is also coming back again on the 15th of July, talking about all things well architected as usual. And on the 2nd of July is a new meetup. This is run by AWS, Gen AI, because every new meetup needs to have that, I think. It's more or less, more or less a requirement these days. I have no idea what to expect from there, but it's probably going to be good fun. It will also be in the AWS office, so. And that's it from me. So I'll just now hand it over to Jason to talk about what's coming.
Alrighty. We actually had a few things that have come live in Melbourne. Excuse me. We've got some new instance types. The R7G instances are available. So if you're using your Gravitrons, check that out. AWS Backup Audit Manager. So if you're utilizing AWS Backup, now you can check your compliance, make sure you're all good. And Neptune Database for if you're doing ML AI stuff within the Melbourne region. So you have that there. There's nothing in Sydney, so we'll jump straight through to compute. Probably the interesting one for me there as well is the Red Hat Enterprise Linux for AWS. So it's, you've always been able to get a Red Hat, but it looks like this one is actually sort of supported and looked after by Red Hat rather than AWS. So could be a little bit interesting. Starts from RHEL 10. So containers, quite a bit there. Pod identity. So that will help you if you're doing sort of cross-account stuff. It sort of sets up some roles and makes it easier if you're trying to access your EKS pods from a different account. Simplifies that. Support for updating capacity provider. Which one was that? There was another one on there. Oh, yeah. So, and some extra updates there. There was an interesting one, which I'll have a look and see if that comes up in other stuff later, but a whole lot extra. So Q Developer has IDE plugins for MCP tools. So not just for your IDEs, but also for the CLI now. So you can add MCPs into your Q Developer experience. Coding experience. So Q Developer also has agentic models available with JetBrains and Visual Studio. CLI now supports Claude Sonnet 4. So bunch of extra stuff. And there's now MCP servers for serverless and containers as well. So you can jump into your MCP tools and you've got some, it's got some knowledge about those things. All right. Route 53 resolver endpoints support DNS delegation for your private hosting zones. So if you're doing some DNS between your on-prem and your AWS, now you've got support for private hosted zones there. VPC raises your default route table capacity, was 50. Now by default you can have 500 routes. So if you've got a fair few routes in your VPC that you want to have, now defaults to 500 without having to get some ask for a quota increase. And also Network Firewall now supports Transit Gateway with native integration. So if you're running your TGWs, you can throw your Network Firewall in front of there and it knows about it. So serverless. So Lambda now has native support for Avo and Protobuf for Kafka events. Got Snapstart excuse me, for Python and .NET is available in a lot more regions now. And Power Tools for AWS Lambda introduces Bedrock Agents function utilities. So, all right, security. Just because everyone's using IPv6 nowadays, you've got private CA support. Interesting one, IAM now has supposedly 100% enforcement for MFA for the root users. If you want to learn a little bit more about that, Stephen was on a podcast describing that. That was one of the topics. So you can watch him on the Logicado podcast and see Steve there. Guest speaker for this week. Access Analyzer now has a look at your SCPs and your other organizations to sort of see who can access your I think it's limited to S3, DynamoDB, and there's one other. So not everything yet, but there are a few things that Access Analyzer can now have a look and not just look at your account, but from an organization level who is able to access those resources. Control Tower supporting service-linked AWS config managed rules. So, yeah, if you're utilizing service-linked rules, config rules, there, Control Tower can now sort of deploy those a lot more easily. And yeah, if you're using verified permissions, and this is a massive reduction of up to 97%. So yeah, this is sort of a new, quite a new method for doing your access permissions, and now they've made a whole heap cheaper. So potentially worth going and checking out. Yeah, yep, definitely worth looking at now. Storage. This one was actually a little bit interesting. The Express One Zone now supports atomic renaming of objects in a single API call. So used to be if you were renaming something in a bucket, basically it would make a copy of that in the new name and then sort of delete the old one. This one just renames it. So object stays there, just gets renamed much quicker. So that's only for your Express One Zone. So yeah, I'm guessing that's probably due to it just being in one place and it doesn't have to worry about all the different AZ copies that it usually would have to. There's some additional context if you have 403 access errors. So now you've got if you're getting some issues with access to your S3, you've now got a little bit more context that you can use to help debug. And another IPv6 for EFS. So for everyone that's jumping on board the IPv6 train, yeah, which is probably no one, but it's there if you ever do. This first one is also relatively interesting, probably a little bit edge case. So if you're using an air-gapped vault in your AWS backup, so something that's sort of outside of your accounts, and like the idea there is if your account gets hacked and stuff, you don't also lose your backups. They're sort of air-gapped in a different place. This one means that you actually now can have multi-approval support to delete stuff that's in your vaults. So even furthermore, if someone gets access and goes to delete all the stuff, now they can't delete your backups. If you have this enabled, you need 2 people to hack your account and before you get your stuff all blown away. So bit of extra security there if you're really concerned about your backups. You can air gap it, and now you can actually put in a multi-party approval before people can delete things. Yeah, some more compliance frameworks for Control Tower. CloudTrail enhances logging for your S3 delete objects API. Funnily enough, this was another topic that was on, I think, last week's Logicata podcast. Previously, if you wanted to do a bulk delete of your S3 objects and say, you put in the API call, deleted a whole bunch of things, CloudTrail will log that you deleted, who it was that did the delete, what bucket it was that they deleted stuff from, but not what got deleted. So this one, now they've enhanced it so it will also track what objects were deleted if you're doing a bulk delete. So so you can actually find out, like, okay, so Fred deleted a whole bunch of stuff from this bucket. What? Now you can find out what was it that Fred deleted from that bucket. Another slightly interesting one. So AWS pricing calculator generally available within the AWS console now. So no longer do you need to go out to a separate website to check your pricing calculator. It's now there in the billing console. And if you're using Amplify hosting, you've now got a couple of bigger options that you can choose. Other stuff, if anyone uses the carbon footprint tool, you can now check location-based emissions. Bunches, I don't know why Matt threw this in, but if anyone's doing a whole lot of IVR work, there's some extra stuff in there. There's a public preview now of the VMware Elastic service. So if you're still doing stuff with VMware and AWS, you've got another option. Or you can just, talk to some of our lovely sponsors and migrate. And if you want to pull invoice summaries, there's now an API to pull that. You don't just have to look at those invoice summaries in the console anymore. And that's probably it for the what's new for this week or month. All right, thanks.
Cool. Thanks, Jason. I'm sure we're all anxious to play with the Elastic VMware service. Cool. That brings us to our first speaker.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming on a very rainy day. I really appreciate all the audience here. So tonight we'll be talking about API destinations for private endpoints from oversight to insight. So before I start, I'd like to ask how many of you have used API destinations or heard of them in AWS world at all? Yeah, there are a couple of them. Awesome. So who am I? Thank you so much. You already covered it, so we can skip. So today on the agenda, we'll be talking about our problem with the story of once upon a monolith. It's always like that. And then we'll discover some of the solutions to our problem that we are going to solve. And then we'll be going through the oversight, the problem, and then discuss about the reInvent 2024 reveal, which is nothing but API destinations for private endpoints, really. And then we'll have a quick live demo and do a good solution deep dive. I'll share some extra nuggets with input transformer, and done. So let me start with the story of once upon a monolith. So we at Prezi, we used to have a monolith, we still do. And monoliths are not bad until you need them to move at the pace of microservices. Pun intended. Well, this worked. As we grew, it became a bottleneck, and this would become obviously a problem. So we started our journey of migrating away from monolith to more microservices. And the reason I'm showing you this is we are going to pick out a slice from this. I want to show how big your architecture can get and how we are going to drill down to the problem that we are trying to solve tonight. So we are going to pick the API slice of it. So at Prezi, we sell gift cards, and we just do not sell gift cards to direct customers, also to businesses. But we also have a couple of APIs that our clients or these businesses use to sell gift cards to their customers. Now, the problem at hand is whenever I want to place an order with an API, I first have to grab some organization information which currently sits in the monolith. And then once I've got the organization information, then only I can call my microservice and place the order. I don't want to call the monolith at all. I just don't want to call it. So solution, I could actually create an organization service, right? But creating an organization and migrating away completely from it, it's not something we can do overnight. It's not an easy change. There are too many dependencies. So what do? We decide to keep the source of truth still in the monolith and create the organization service and have an active sync between the monolith and the service. So every time the data is updated in the monolith, it is synced up with the organization service. So the problem for tonight that we are looking at is this little arrow. This is what we are trying to solve tonight. So how do we sync the data from our monolith to our microservice? Now, you don't have to be smart. This is a talk about AWS API destinations, so this is definitely not the solution we are looking for, the direct sync. So what this tells you is you just directly sync. You mean just call the endpoint in the organization service and do it. Well, this is not the right way. Why? Because this direct sync basically creates tight coupling between these two services and making your system much more fragile, harder to scale, and difficult to evolve independently. What we are looking for is more of an event-driven architecture. Now, in an event-driven architecture, the communication between the services happens by publishing and consuming events. So if service 1 wants to talk to service 2, service 1 would publish an event on an event bus or an event bridge, whatever you want to call it. And then when service 2 is ready to consume it, it would pick it up and then consume and do something with it. So this way, you have loosely coupled architecture, and it could actually process your message asynchronously, and it supports more scalability. So now let's actually look at some of the architectural patterns to solve our problem of syncing the data from the monolith to the microservice. First one being, so what we are going to do is we are going to go through these architectural diagrams. So we have a monolith, and it would publish an event to an event bridge. And from there, we have an SQS as the consumer. SQS is your simple queue service. And once the message is there, what we do from our microservice is we poll for the messages. And then we also have a dead letter queue or a DL queue attached. So a dead letter queue is there just in case your messages fail. It ends up in the DL queue so that you can replay and redrive them back. So can anyone tell me what is one of the biggest problems with this approach? Let's actually discuss pros first. So it is simple, easy. You can just do polling, nothing too much, less maintenance. The problems are, how do you know when to poll? What should be your polling frequency? Are you polling too quickly? Are you polling too slow? And what is like the sensitivity that you want? Maybe you're polling too slow and there's a lot of messages there. Then you have to do or deal with the complexity of batch processing, right? And then there would also be things about maintaining the idempotency of those messages. And one of the problems with queues is you have to actually delete the message manually. Like you just can't, just reading the message is not enough. You also have to delete it from the queue. So maybe not an ideal solution. Let's improve it. Let's look at another design. How about from your SQS, you actually trigger a lambda. And then your lambda basically calls an exposed endpoint in your microservice. Would this work? Yes, it is actually a very popular solution. A lot of people do this. It has been there for a very long time. But, and if you have like complex data transformations, then you can definitely do it in your lambda. It would do that, and then you can just simply call your endpoint. But some of the problems are, if you look at it, now you have introduced multiple points of failures. So redriving messages or replaying messages could actually be a bit more tricky. The another point I do not like about this is I just want a simple sync. I don't want to do any transformation. Then why do I have to have so much of infrastructure and code to maintain, like another lambda to maintain? You have to continuously maintain it. I don't want to do that. It's just a lot of work. So let's look at next approach, which is how about we use SNS topic or simple notification service topic. Now, what will happen is Monolith will again publish the event on Event Bridge. It would be going to an SNS topic, and your service subscribes to that topic, and then it gets the message and be done. But remember, SNS topics are mainly for when you want to fan out the same message to multiple downstream services. It is quite real time, I agree, but the use case is not the same that we want really. So, and some of the problems with this approach is that the event structure with SNS is actually plain text and not JSON. And you have to set up like an acknowledgement first before you can use that topic. So it gets a bit tricky, and it adheres to the message schema adheres to like AWS schema, and so they can always come and say, okay, I'm removing this field, you have to change, and you have to rely on that. So coming on to the star solution of the night, which is API destinations. Now, what are API destinations? So API destination is like, okay, I want to send my message to API destination, which is really the endpoint of that exposed microservice. It's literally like a wrapper around it. You're just literally hitting your microservice straight away, and yet, in an event-driven architectural pattern. Best part, you just have to do infrastructure as code. Once deployed, it would work forever. No extra code, nothing to maintain. Once deployed, it works. It just works. So you don't have to do literally anything additional on that. However, some of the problems, you cannot do very complex transformations. You can still do some transformations, but not the very complex ones. And debugging can be tricky. I'll talk about the debugging later on. So without further ado, it's demo time. So let's actually do a quick demo. So what I have done is, so I'm obviously mocking whole, I won't be creating a monolith, I don't have to obviously. So we can just publish the event, and I have got the API destination, which basically is calling my, the destination is my microservices exposed endpoint, and that's it. Let's see how it works, okay? So let's change a couple of things here. Let me change what I'm sharing. No. Okay, this is good. Yes, this is what we want. And so this is the service that I've created, and this is the ping endpoint. It works. It's a public endpoint. It works, right? Now I have added another endpoint in there, which is a syncer endpoint. Do let me know if you can't see it. I'll zoom in. Is this better? Yeah, okay. So I've created a syncer endpoint, and whenever I send it anything, it basically would give me an event received and would just log everything that I have sent it. Now I'm using this format of sending the events because I'm going to use the syncer endpoint as something to that exposed endpoint in my service. So what I have got here is data type foo bar key true and done. So if I do that, event received. So let's actually have a look at my service. So this is the public service ECS cluster. Let me know if you want me to zoom in further. All good? Everyone at the back? Okay, so this is the service. Let's look at the ALB. The ALB, it's internet facing, it's public endpoint, and I'll close that, and we go to logs, and I can see some of the logs, which is just actually printing what I have sent. All right, looks good, well and working. Now let's look at the event bridge. So this is, can you see this one clearly? Yes. Okay, so what I have done is I have created a test bus within which I have defined two rules. Let's look at the public API destination rule. Now this rule gets triggered whenever the detail type is public API dest. Okay? And what it is going to do, it's going to call, or the target is the API destination. So let's show you the API destination. This is my API destination, and this is the endpoint. As I told you about it, the syncer endpoint using method as post, and it is also using a connection, which is a public connection because it's a public endpoint, and you just define some authentication details, and that's it. So let's actually see this in action. But before we do that, let me actually show you the rule in the edit mode so that you see what all things are there. So it is a rule that is triggered with a pattern. I've defined the pattern here, as you already saw this. The next thing is I'm using an event bridge API destination, public, and I'm using an existing. Let's actually see what all options are there when you want to create one. So you can just provide the endpoint, like the syncer endpoint I have given. You can use the method, and then you can even provide rate limiting if you want. And then you have to provide a connection type. You can just create a new connection, give it a name, and it's a public connection. You can provide any authorization type. I'm just using API key, and that's it. So I'm going to cancel this because I've already created one. It's already there. So without any ado, let's actually call our, let's actually test our integration, right? So the source is I'm actually sending it from my console, and the detail type is public API dest. So let me change the detail type to this. Event, I can directly copy from here. Now, I would copy just from here and would skip the detail part because prettify this, and if you review it, you'd see that it already wraps it within the detail thing. Okay, so actually, let's go back to edit. Maybe I'll change something. I'll call it food and maybe Cadbury bar. Okay, and send. It sends. Let's see if we have got new logs. Yay, there you go. It works. So this is your API destination working for a public endpoint. Going back to slides. Okay. Now, last year, I was actually working on a discovery, and then once I finished my discovery, I proposed a solution to my team, and then we go into an implementation mode in the next quarter, right? We went to implementation, and guess what? The service, the microservice, was an internal service. It was a private endpoint, and API destinations do not work for private endpoints. Did not work for private endpoints. But good thing, reInvent 2024, they announced this new thing where now they do. It was a huge, big reveal, big announcement, because now you can use private endpoints with all of your Event Bridge services, basically. So now that you saw the architecture for public endpoints, before I do that, before I go to how private endpoints look like, let me show you the private endpoint as well. So I showed you this service. I have created exactly the replica, but an internal service. So I'm changing from public to private. If I call it, you would see it's never going to load. It's never going to work. Okay? So I'll just stop it there. Instead, if I try to call it from my Bastion host, so let me connect. Actually, let me copy that again. Here, the URL. And if I try to use it and call it from my Bastion host, then I get a POM, this little thing. So it works, right? Never mind. So that works. Similarly, the syncer endpoint should also work. So if I just do private and get the curl command and just run it here, it says event received. Now let me show you the internal service. So this is the internal service cluster. And if you look at the service, if you look at the ALB, this ALB, it's internal. If you look at the subnet, this is private subnet, okay? And if you look at the security group is closed. It's not open to everybody, okay? So it is an internal service indeed. So we go here, look at the logs, and we got the foo bar thing from here. Now that endpoint is working, but again, if I go to my public API destination right now, edit it, and change it from public to private, and then save it. I've updated the public one to private for now. And then if I resend this event with the Cadbury bar, I would never see the logs in my internal service. They would never show up. And what I found when I was saying debugging is tricky is I couldn't actually found them landing in the DLQ either. I don't know, maybe I configured it wrong, but to be honest, I found it really hard to debug. Unless we actually read the documentation, we couldn't actually found the real cause that why it was not working. It was not supported really. So that's why I said debugging could be tricky. But anyway, let's actually go back to the slides. So you saw the architecture, how simple it is for public endpoints. Now I'm going to show you this for private endpoints. And I want you to not feel overwhelmed looking at it. It's not that hard. It's actually quite simple. Again, it's all infrastructure as code. You once have to deploy it. You do it only once, and it works forever. So what you do is this. So now what's happening is you already had a monolith, event bridge. You already had the service. You already had the API destination. So monolith, event bridge, your service and API destination. It obviously has a connection, as we already saw. Okay. Now this is your microservice. Now this is within a private subnet. The ALB has a security group attached. So what you exactly do is you attach or create a resource gateway to your security group. The resource gateway, as the name suggests, gateway, it's like a gateway or a connection that allows to access resources within a particular VPC or security group, okay, within a particular VPC. And what resources to allow access for? You define them within the resource configuration. So you just tell, okay, I want to allow my microservice, which is within this security group, this is within this VPC, whatever, and I tell that this microservice or this endpoint or this resource, I tell that resource within the resource configuration. And once I connect it with the API destination connection, AWS automatically creates something called as service network association. So you don't have to create service network association. It automatically creates it for you because it creates like a logical grouping of those resources. So you don't have, so it doesn't have to do a lot of, I would say it's a logical grouping easily for it to understand the whole network configuration. So you don't have to really do much there. So if you're confused, as I can see some faces, don't be. We can actually look at it and do it and see how it works, okay? So let me, how much time? Okay. Let me go back here. So let's actually look at the private API destination that I've got. So the rules, private API destination, target, I will go to private API connection. Now, first I thought what I'll do is I'll create it on the go, you know, take that challenge, but no, I can't take it, it's too hard to do it. So what I have decided is I would actually go into an edit mode and show you how I configured things. So whenever you are, I found myself very helpful to do it this way whenever I'm trying to create any new POCs, trying a new service. So I'll be sharing that, and maybe you find it easy as well to create new stuff. So what I do is, so you already saw the API destination we were looking at. So we are looking at the connection part right now. Sorry, not we're just looking at the API destination. I'm going to go to the connection. This is the private connection. And I'm going to go to edit mode. Now, first you select private, obviously. Now, the next thing it asks you is to create a new resource configuration. Okay, so let's create a new resource configuration. We are not going to create anything. We are just going to use what we already have. We are just in the edit mode, but let's see. So what I would do is I would create resource single. I don't want to have too many resources, but the next thing it's asking me to create a resource geteway. Okay, let's create a resource gateway. Now in here, what I would do is I would select the VPC, and then I would select the subnet in each region. I want private subnet. Okay, so this way, this is the gateway that I'm trying to create. And then I can use any security group. So I am using a default VPC security group so that anything that is within the VPC I can get access to. All right, and then I just create it. So I'm not going to create one right now. I'll just show you the one that is already there. This is the one that already exists. It already has access to these subnets. These are, again, private subnets. It's a private subnet, as you can see. All right, and then going back, once we suppose have a resource gateway, we continue doing the resource configuration. It is a DNS resource. You can have an IP resource. So I can just provide the domain name, the public private API destination, something, something. And then I can provide the port ranges, HTTP 80, HTTPS 443, whatever. And then the next thing is I can have more stuff with that. I haven't played around with this one, but it allows you to share resources across AWS accounts and even through organizations. I haven't tried this. If you try it, let me know how you go. And I think that's it. Once you create the resource configuration, it looks like this. So now it knows that, okay, I have to share this resource using this resource gateway. So the resource gateway has the resource configuration, and then the resource configuration has the service network association. So once you publish this change here in the API destination, once in the connection, it actually would create this service network association. It would tell, it would be a logical grouping for all the things to connect and talk to each other. So, okay, let's see this in action. So remember I told you I have got two rules. So I have got this private API rule as well. So if I just use private API dest as the event type, it should actually trigger the private API destination, which basically talks to my internal service. Okay, I'm sending Cadbury bar. Send again. And now, actually I'll close these for now so that there is no more confusion. So now, going back to my internal service, looking at the logs, it says Cadbury bar. So it works. Okay. I'll show you one more example. So I did some more things to this. I made a bit more of change, and I want to share this event. Let me copy this first, and let's try to send this event. I'm going to go edit and send this. So consider I have this organization data that I want to sync. So if you look at this one, can you see this clearly, what it is? Organization, I want you to look at the structure. Organization, name, email, created at today, okay? And I just send it. When I do that, and this is the public one, I'll close this. When I do that, look at what I get. I get organization name Prezi, email help@Prezi, and created at today. It gives me all the things, right? But hang on. We were talking about what if I have a different data that is coming and my service cannot directly ingest it. We need some transformation. So let me show you another object or another thing. Wait. So what if my service can consume this data right now? It can read the organization name, email when you send it this way, in this structure. But what if my monolith is sending the information in a different way? What it is sending right now is, say, it calls it as org data, nothing as organization. It calls it, then within it, it has a customer, and then within it, it has name and email, and no created at, okay? This is what my monolith is sending. Now see whether my service can actually consume it, okay? So if I do a send, and if I look at the logs again, org data, customer, it is able to get these information, but what I wanted basically is, I did not show you the complete logs earlier. So I was able to see organization, Prezi, organization, this was previously, but now, hang on. It does not print those. If you look at it, it will not print those. There is a time difference that you can use to check. This was at 9:24. Maybe, wait. Let me change details so that you know it does not show it. Let me call this as AWS, help at AWS, okay? So it would be better to identify. So you've got that, but that's it. You never got information such as organization, AWS, organization email help@AWS, you won't see that in the logs. So you're not able to, your service is not able to read that. That is the problem. How do we solve it? Going back to my slides. Oh, we solve it with something called as, how do we do the data transformation? Anybody? We do that using something called as input transformers. Now, what are input transformers? Let's go back and let's look at the event rule. Now, when you define your rules, so let's go into the edit mode again. I'm going to go to the edit mode here. So when you are defining your rules, do you see this next step? You would see in the additional settings, configure target input. So you are actually sending the events as is. But there is an option. You can actually use something called as input transformer. Now, configure input transformer. Now this is a little bit tricky, but we can do this, okay? So if you will have to go and read more about it, but what basically input transformer does is, you can actually transform the input that you're getting from the, the monolith or the event. You actually transform it to the structure you like. So I'm going to do that, and I'll show you how it works, okay? So let me go and copy this so that we save some time. So, and prettify. Okay, so what I want to do is, so remember, the structure was, I am getting org data, under which I have got customer, under which I have got the name and the email. So what I do is, I tell that, okay, email field is coming from detail, payload, org data, customer, and email. Similarly, name is coming from detail, payload, org data, customer, and name. Okay, and then the timestamp, I can actually get the real-time timestamp, and I can just use this. You can actually use a lot of variables. You can read about it more here, but in interest of time, we'll just continue. And then in the template, you again define what things would look, okay, what fields would get those values. What fields would go get those values. So I've defined the structure that, okay, my target should receive in this pattern, should receive the event in this pattern. It should have the organization, under which it should have the name that we are getting from the org data here, email that we are getting from here, and created at that we already defined here as the timestamp. Okay, cool. All right, so let me confirm this, and next, and next, and let's update the rule. Okay, now that I've updated the rule, let me go back here and resend this event. Once I resend it, let's see what are the logs. Ta-da! You get name, AWS, email, help@AWS, created at real-time created at. And one more thing, if you have not noticed, I was using something else in my payload earlier. Every time I was using a data sync event type, I'm using data transformed this time. So it is coming after it has got transformed through the input transformer. So that is the power of input transformers. You can actually transform all your input, and you can just get it to be ready to be consumed by your service. So I think that's it. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
One moment, please.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So first question, on the diagram that you showed, you didn't show where is the subnet and if the monolithic application is on any of the subnet.
Yeah.
Where, and second point is concerning the transformer. Is it not doing a validation as well in terms of what type of structure you can furnish to your endpoint?
Okay, Let's start with your first question.
Yeah,
So
sure.
you wanted to see if it is connected to a subnet and things, right?
Correct.
Yes. So this is the internal service, ECS cluster. Okay. This is the service, and I'll show you the load balancer. This load balancer is deployed or connected within the, it's in the private subnet.
So the application also is on the same subnet.
Yes.
Okay, so the diagram needs to be updated then.
Yeah. When so it's basically the load balancer which you would be hitting, right? That needs to be in the private subnet. Your application is obviously, it's
Should be reachable within the subnet configured.
Yeah. Okay. Did I answer your question correctly?
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Okay. All right. Coming to the next question with the input transformer about validation, right?
Yes.
So if it does a little bit of validation, I would say, in the terms that if I go here, I don't know. Actually, good question. Let's see if it allows this. Well, it allows. It doesn't do any validation. Yeah, don't trust it. Do it carefully. But it definitely checks the JSON if it is correct or not. So yeah, that's the thing. You have to do it yourself.
Okay, so the validation in this context is like the application itself is not doing any validation or microservice. It's done here at the rule level in terms of like what kind of format it can provide.
Oh, okay. So consider it like this. Your application should have that validation itself.
Yes.
Yeah,
so
it's not
duplicate then.
validation. It's just matching the schema. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the application itself should not provide any kind of format JSON to the API endpoint. This is the first point, right? So the rule that you added is just to beautify to get the logs.
So my application was only able to show those logs when you give it in a certain format. But say Monolith was sending the data in a different format. So I used the transformer to match the format which my application can actually use and show what I want. I'm matching the schema. Let's take this offline.
Okay, sure, thanks.
In the interest of time, I would say we'll leave any further questions for afterwards. So CEO of Cuidado Connect, an innovative aged care startup and a principal at v2.ai in Melbourne, Australia. He also co-hosts the Cloud Dialogues podcast. He's focused on platform abstractions like serverless, and Matthew helps accelerate business outcomes and empower developers to embrace new ways of working that boost delivery velocity. You forgot to mention that you're also one of the organizers of the serverless meetup.
Oh,
Terrible.
Something.
And this talk was also given at Summit. So
Hello,
looking forward.
testing.
Are you plugged in?
Yeah. Oh, no, not yet. Yes, I am. Hang on. Okay. Cool. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here for this talk. I gave this in Sydney a couple of weeks ago, and you'll get a slightly extended version because that was a short time slot. So today I'm going to talk about the startup that I am a co-founder of. We are doing falls detection in aged care. I'll start off with a bit of a story. So we all have relatives who are elderly, usually, or we know someone who has. So I have a bit of a personal story where my grandmother, maybe 10 years ago, was in a retirement village and she fell in her bedroom and she broke her shoulder and no one found her for a number of hours after that happened. So usually the technology in these places is a button on the wall. Back then, there's wearables these days to detect if someone's fallen, or you can press a button to call someone to help you, but the technology is relatively sort of primitive in most places. So there is quite a bit of technology that's come a long way, especially over the last few years, and that's what this startup's about. So I'm going to cover the problem we are solving. Understanding the requirements for your customer is important. We're going to talk about what a minimum lovable product is and what a minimum viable product is, and the relationship between those two things. We'll talk about enriching events. It's a very it's an IoT type scenario with lots of JSON payloads and stuff. So there's a little few tips and tricks there. We'll cover off how to deal with real-time events, and then we'll end off with some takeaways. So some stats. Australians, the stats haven't changed. I just picked these years because it was easy. Australians aged 65 and over are almost 12 times more likely to get injured due to a fall than obviously younger people, and that's for a number of reasons. Their bones are more brittle, they're more prone to getting dizzy and falling over, it could be a medication problem, there's all sorts of reasons. And falls are the number one cause of accidental injury as well in older Australians. And more than 60% of falls occur in the bedroom. So again, probably not surprising there because you spend a lot of time there, especially when you're elderly, and as you get older, and you're more prone to having sort of bad events happen. So a typical aged care room setup has usually a pressure sensor floor mat to detect where someone is, or when someone's fallen on the floor, it might be next to the bed. There's bed alarms, and there's infrared switches as well. Sometimes there's like a little beam, which is infrared beam, that can be placed in various places in the room, so you can get early warning of someone moving around. Maybe it'll go to the nurse's station, and then they'll come down and help that person when that beam's broken, like primitive switch effectively. This setup can easily cost thousands of dollars per room, and it's all mechanical stuff that needs maintenance and prone to breakage, so needs a lot of maintenance to keep it working. So how can tech help? This is my diagram of an aged care facility, aged care room. They all follow the same layout. You have an ensuite and a bedroom basically, and a window usually, if you're lucky. No, most places have got a window. You need to look out and see the world. And I've got a little elderly person there in the room as well. So there's these devices that are called millimetre wave radar. So they have a little radar on board, which you can place on the roof in the rooms that you want to monitor. And the way they work is that they emit radio waves all around the room, and they bounce off any heavy, dense objects, which is people. Also pets, but you don't have pets in aged care facilities. You have them at home. That's a different problem. Things like curtains, furniture, things like that don't affect it because they're not dense enough for it to bounce back off. And then there's a whole bunch of mathematics around where that person is. Once it's got the bounce back radio wave, there's a whole lot of mathematics on board which determines where the person is in the room. So XY coordinates in relation to the device, and the Z, which is basically centre of mass of the person. And then the other cool thing what they can do is when you fall, there's a lot of machine learning on board. So there's a lot of machine learning models on board which can work out the likelihood of someone actually falling. You know, it's not as simple as your Z going to 0, but there's a whole lot of scenarios where you might be going down to pick something up and come back up, you know, things like that. The fall will register after usually about 30 seconds if it's a high chance of a fall, and it sends an alert. So it sends presence alerts for where someone is in a room regularly, and then extra events like getting out of bed, doorway, and fall alerts. So during this process, you've got to understand your stakeholder personas. I've picked 2 here. There'll be an aged care facility manager and a nurse, right? So they have similar, sometimes the same requirements and sometimes different needs. So facility manager needs reporting. Make sure prioritisation of care is you know, correct for each patient. Recording of falls and recovery times, and compliance that they have to deal with, especially around government reporting. And they're all batch, they don't have to be real time. Well, prioritisation of care, falls detection and response is obviously has to be near real time because that's the whole purpose. You be able to understand if someone's fallen, they need help, the nurse needs to go there and help that person. So having the 2 personas gives you a bunch of requirements and then you can work out if you need to deal with real time or whether batch is good enough. Batch is a lot easier to deal with. Real time has a little bit of extra complexity, which I'll cover towards the end. So the device just needs Wi-Fi and power to work, and it's connecting to IoT Core in this particular scenario. So we'll give a quick refresher on what IoT Core is in AWS. It's basically a standards-based IoT endpoint that talks MQTT, which is MQTTS and MQTT WebSockets, or it can use a HTTPS endpoint. In this case, we're using MQTTS because that's basically a message queue pub-sub scenario. So it's just sending JSON events to the endpoint, and then it's ingested into the system. So the IoT device publishes the event to that endpoint, which is a highly available managed endpoint that you don't have to worry about. You just have to configure it up on the device, and there's rules on the back end which helps you work out what to do with those JSON payloads. And then those events are processed. You can go through any service. We have a couple in here I'll show you configured to process these events. So payload looks something like this. It's just a JSON blob, nothing fancy. It has a device ID. There's a bunch of stuff I've removed just for brevity. There's obviously an X, Y, Z coordinates. In this case, this is a fall alert. So it gives you a timestamp and a fall type. Very simple. So initially, to get some buy-in from stakeholders, you do a demo. And this is called, effectively, it's a POC. It also could be an MVP, minimum viable product, because I didn't have to code anything. Well, I had to code some Athena SQL statements, but I didn't have to do any front end, I didn't have to do any of that, do a bit of back end stuff, but it's effectively a Grafana dashboard, which is very low code, not much to it. And Grafana dashboards you can easily connect to pretty much any sort of back end. In this case, it's Athena, and there's some CloudWatch metrics as well. And then you do a demo. So my son was good enough to fall, and he was in bed, he got out and he fell, poor guy. And then I got an alert, so there's the alert there. So that was all done basically with a Grafana dashboard with a bit of a Lambda function on the back end that gets the alert and sends it to SNS, which goes to my phone. So version 1 can be a POC, basically MVP. You can get a long way with Grafana. So this is what the back end looks like for that build. It allows you to get familiar with the product, you know, the events, the queries that you need, which all become useful information for later on down the track. So on the left, obviously, is the IoT device. It's connected to the MQTT endpoint. There's a rule that grabs that JSON payload, and then there's in this case, there's an SNS action, which sends it to a SNS topic, which goes to a Lambda function to transform the data to something readable, which gets sent to a topic, which goes to my phone. So that's pretty much the basic version 1. And then there's also a secondary topic, a secondary rule, which sends it to CloudWatch logs. Cool thing about that is that you can have CloudWatch log metric filters, which allows you to pretty much, not quite for free, but pretty low cost, to pull out some information, put it into a custom metric in CloudWatch, to, you know, so you can see the history of, you know, someone being in bed, someone, you know, getting out of bed, those sorts of events, and it's easy to query those, especially from Grafana, because that's what it's for. And I have another rule which persists the event because I need for my batch queries. So the second one, obviously, the first one is for the real time, and the last one is for persisting the event into S3 through Firehose, and then to a S3 storage at the back end to be able to query it with Athena. And that's how I can get all that nice sort of graphs and state transitions, and just with some SQL queries. And obviously the dashboard is connected to all these outputs to display the information. And I have actually Grafana, you can have a plugin to connect to a Postgres database, and that's where I've stored my email address. So I can actually update the database from the front end with my email address, and Lambda function reads that to know where to send it. So it's all self-contained in a quick demo. So an MVP allowed us to understand the idea, see what's workable, understand the product enough to be able to query it intelligently, and answer business questions, pretty much all those business questions at the beginning, right? Requirements, customer requirements. Make sure you know them so you know what you're building. Not so good. Data is only set up for a single tenant, and Grafana dashboard is not really consumable at scale. It could almost be, but we need to build something a little bit better for customers to consume. So the first thing is adding tenant context to the alerts. So the alert just has a device ID. That's it. Nothing else. I don't want all my alerts for all my customers to be in one prefix in S3 because you want to separate them out a little bit. I don't have access to the device. Sometimes you can have access to these IoT devices to put certificates on, things like that. Certificates allow you to easily determine which customer is what device. If you don't have that ability to change anything on the device, what do you do? So we're back to an architecture diagram. So my workaround was to, the slightly change the way the system works. So the device publishes to a topic of that name, /devices/device ID/events. So I have an action which sends it to a Lambda function to enrich the JSON document, to add a tenant ID into some metadata, and then it republishes it to a new, pretty much the same topic with a tenant ID prepended to the front. So then, with that, I can, I'll show you the next slide, but you can query the actual path that you're publishing it to, and then take that detail out, and I can have a fire hose per tenant. So then all my extra tenant data goes to a different prefix, still in the same bucket, but with a different prefix means you can separate the data out, and you can have IAM rules to stop customers being able to see other tenants' data. And obviously it goes to SNS as well. So that's the query, which allows you to, it's basically doing a select star topic 4 is device ID, so you count from the left to the right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, the second plus is the fourth element, and that's the device ID. So I'm grabbing the device ID out and putting it as part of the select statement, so it's basically adding it to the JSON document. And my Firehose action is sending it to a delivery stream with a topic 2, which is, if you're counting from the left, the topic 2 is the first plus sign, which is the tenant ID. So I can have the tenant ID in my delivery stream name. So all that customer data goes to that one Firehose. And it's scalable for any number of customers. So the enriched event looks something like that. I have a metadata key with some topics there, and you can add timestamps, and it can keep adding to that metadata as it passes through the pipeline, which allows you to have some history and debugging and all that sort of stuff. So knowing when an event went through your system and where it went at what time is super useful from a metric perspective. From a Athena partitioning perspective, there's 2 ways to do this. The way that everyone usually does it is with the Hive style, which most people who have done any data on S3 probably use something like this, where you have your partition name, which is usually like a year, month, day, and it's all defined nicely like that, and your JSON file appears at the end there. So it's glue catalog compatible, but new partitions requires a refresh every day to be able to get the new partitions. So you've got to do a repair query or a glue query. Glue queries aren't free. They cost, and the money sort of adds up. The other way to do it is using partition projection. So you basically tell it, you tell Athena what your layout looks like. You don't name the partitions. You tell it, it knows it's a year, it knows it's a month, knows it's a day, so it can all intelligently, depending on the query coming in, know how to query that particular date because it knows it's in date format. It's not glue catalog compatible though. They come up in glue as, I think, partition 1, 2, 3 or something, not very friendly to query, but that's okay, I'm not using glue for it. It's all Athena based. Firehose and CloudTrail deliver in this format natively, by the way. So Firehose dynamic partitions, when you're setting up your Firehose, you can actually so obviously if I want to use partition projection, I've got to deliver my files in that particular format. So I've got to pull out the year, month, day, and device ID out of the payload, which is what these JQ queries do. It grabs the timestamp, which is in millisecond format, and grabs the year, month, and day, and device ID. And then, which allows you to have a custom S3 bucket prefix as part of your Firehose configuration, where you can do so mine is tenant ID / presence for someone being in the room, and then there's a format where you grab your year, month, and day, put it in that, and that way it'll look something like that. So you'll have a sort of a date format. In my case, it looks like that. And then I can query that with Athena without having to refresh my partition every day. And for Athena to be able to understand this, you give it a bit of configuration when you create your table, and that's where you tell it it's a date format, and that's the magic that allows you to query it properly. So the last part is around real time. So we've got the rest of the architecture diagram which I had earlier. This is the SNS part. So I have a queue which subscribes to the, there's a filter policy which is subscribed to a payload type of fall in this case, so I could have different queues for different events and keep them all separate and then process them all with separate Lambda functions. So in this case, it's you subscribe the queue to a particular SNS topic, and it's filtering only on those types of events. Any other types of events that aren't falls won't get processed by the Lambda function. So Lambda function grabs that, puts it into a DynamoDB table. So I've got a record of the falls, and then there's a DynamoDB stream, which is used by event bridge pipes to kick off a step function. So when you want to alert someone to a fall, you want to have a workflow and an escalation path for if someone doesn't answer the first time, you need to go to a second level. And in my case, I've got 3 levels of escalation, which can be configured by the user to be able to help if someone needs help. And then once the event's acknowledged, it updates the table, so I have a record of when it was acknowledged. Step functions has had an update in the last month where it looks a little prettier in the console, so I managed to snag a copy of that. And you can see at the beginning, it stores the execution ID of the step function flow in Dynamo, like using a direct service integration. Then it runs a Lambda function to do level 1, grabs the contact details, sends the SMS or email, whatever the user has configured in the front end. And then there'll be a wait time. And then once that wait time is exceeded, and it'll check if anyone's responded. And if no one's responded, it'll go to level 2 and all the way down to level 3. And hopefully it doesn't get that far, but anyway. 3 levels of escalation is usually enough. And this is the version 1 of the product, which is a SaaS product. That's the dashboard, which is changing pretty much by the week at the moment. But you can get where my picture is there. That's a little graph showing the falls trend, which was like one test fall. So the idea is that there's a dashboard that people can see at a glance. There's some settings to be able to set up escalation, paths, and SMS, notification, all that sort of stuff. And so the key takeaways: if you're building something, go low code, no code, or Claude, vibe code, flowgram, whatever. Flowgramming, you need to see Michael's talk to know what that is, but everyone knows vibe coding. Low code is great because you can build something really quickly. Like, test it out, see if it works for your use case, get buy-in from potential customers. It's fast. Dashboards are good because they're visual, highly visual. Everyone likes a picture. Utilising CloudWatch metric filters is a very nice tip, which not a lot of people know about. Understand if you need batch or real-time. Batch if possible. Batch is easy. Real-time's trickier, obviously, because there's a little bit more complexity there. But batch is usually enough for reporting. That batch you could have up to like 1 or 2 minutes behind because the latency to get into S3 is really low. And querying Athena, even a whole bunch of JSON files, is really fast. People say you have to aggregate those files to get performance, but you don't, because especially if it's a small amount of data, Athena will query it within a couple of seconds. Understand your customer needs, obviously will give you that answer and allow you to visualize events. And enriching your event payloads is the other tip. If you've got events going through a system, always add times through the various sections of your architecture to be able to debug later and understand where things went wrong. And so an MVP proves it works, and an MLP makes it indispensable. So that's my minimum lovable product. There is no survey to do, so don't do that. Actually, you can do this one. This is my community. This is my LinkedIn. If you want to connect and talk about this sort of stuff, happy to do that. That's the next slide that you can't do. So that's all. Thank you. We might have time for one question, maybe.
Yeah, one question.
So can we use some kind of cheaper motion sensor like PIR sensor instead of web sensor?
You can, well, yeah, so they exist. Yes, there's a lot of consumer.
Because
cheap.
PIR sensor would be cheaper than.
Yeah. This is like a couple $100 because it's business grade, you know, a commercial grade product.
Yeah.
There are smaller sensors that do similar things. I don't know if they do fall detection very well. There's only a couple of people who do the fall detection and stuff, you know, in a production quality way, and you have to sort of pay that because, you know, that's what you're getting for. But there are other motion, if you just want motion sensor, then yeah, there's like cheap stuff from China or whatever that can do that. But for this sort of stuff, you need a quality commercial grade sensor.
Cool, thank you.
No.
Any other questions? Maybe reach out to Matt.
Reach out to me, I'll be at the back.
Or scan the QR code and
Yeah.
link it. That brings us to the end of the evening. A quick marketplace segment. I explained it earlier tonight. Is anybody looking to hire someone at the moment? There is deep silence. It's deafening. Okay. I love our economy at the moment. We still have drinks at the back. Feel free to take them. Otherwise, we'll have to throw them away or load our own backpacks to the brim. I don't want to carry several kilos worth of drinks, so please grab another drink. And as you get up, please grab all your rubbish and things and dispose of it properly in the bins outside. With that, thank you very much. Oh, thanks to our sponsors first. Mental Group, CIVO, and NAP, of course. Thank you. And our speakers, yes. And we'll be back Wednesday, the 30th of July for our 150th meetup. Yeah. Thank you all for coming.